What a way to begin the evening with Mercy Now, my favorite song. I'm such a fan. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a special event brought to you by the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where it is our mission to bring unity to our community by elevating the voices of the adoption constellation. I'm Marcy Keithley, and on behalf of the adoption community, we are honored and thrilled to welcome our guest this evening, Mary Gauthier. So please show her some love in the chat bar if you haven't already, and let her know where you're from. Welcome, Mary. We're so excited you're here.
Oh, it's so good to see everybody. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're quite welcome. I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen you. I think of the last time was in concert in Louisville, and you attended the AAC conference in Orlando. I think a lot of us met you there where you performed. So you've been doing some amazing things since then. So we're going to talk about all those amazing things, but the main thing we want to talk about tonight is Saved by a Song. So if you don't have your copy, everybody out there, you can go to Mary's website. We'll go ahead and put the link in the chat bar again tonight. It's Saved by a Song. So let's just dig in. You ready?
Let's go.
Okay. So, all right. So Emmy-nominated American folk singer, songwriter, and now the best-selling author of Saved by a Song. I'm such a fan. Your book really is a hybrid, Mary. Memoir.
Yeah, it's a mashup. It's not a single thing, that's for sure.
So when did you begin writing this, and what gave you the inspiration to write the story?
Well, it started as a book for Yale University Press because the editor there approached me to write a book for them in a series that they put out through the university press called Why Something Matters. So they have a book, Why Acting Matters, Why Architecture Matters, Why Translation Matters, and so forth and so on. They wanted me to write Why Songs Matter. So I did my best for them. I signed the contract, and in the process of finishing it up, the editor who signed me left Yale University Press, moved to Berkeley, and is now running a nonprofit press called Heyday, which publishes California writers and indigenous American writers. So I lost my guy at Yale, and the book did not come out, so I got to keep it. And that led me to St. Martin's Press. Lucky me, because a university press is a very different animal than a major publisher in New York. So I'm on one of the big publishers in New York, which is like being on a major label again as an artist. You know, it's a much bigger team, a much larger audience and budget. And so I've got a bunch of people, you've worked with several, who are doing my publicity and working the book in a myriad of ways a university press never would have done. So that's how it all came to be. And it grew into more of a memoir. Yale did not want memoir. They wanted a more of a scholastic book, a book for educators. And I was never a good match for that because I'm not a trained musician. Everything I do is instinctual. I can't read music or anything. I'm very much about gut instinct. So I know why songs matter, and I wrote them that book, but they wanted more technical information I never learned, and I don't think you need to know actually to write really good songs. Johnny Cash didn't know about it. Hank Williams didn't know about it. They wrote great songs. Woody Guthrie. So there's a lot of songwriters like me who can write songs without having a formal music education. So this book here is about songwriting, but it's about so much more. It really contains a lot of my story. And of course, my story is all wrapped around being an adoptee and how that impacted my life and all of the different things I've had to go through and learn and make sense of as I became more and more aware of the impact of the first year of my life spent in an orphanage.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, for those that are meeting you for the very first time, I thought it would be great to kind of share a little bit about that so that that one day, March 11th, 1962, that's where this whole journey began. So you want to share some of that story with us?
Yeah, my adoption story is not atypical for someone my age. I was born to an unmarried Catholic woman in 1962. She went to St. Vincent's in New Orleans to give birth to me. And she left me there, and I was adopted about, I think, 10 and a half, 11 months later. So I am a Louisiana native, raised Catholic. And my adoptive family is Catholic. And St. Vincent's was a place that I always knew about, and I always knew I was adopted, but I never understood it as an adult. It was something that was told to me as a child, and my understanding of it never progressed past a childlike understanding until music and song brought me to that place as an adult. And man, was that intense to be brought there without planning to be, really. It was a surprise to me that, first of all, that the place still existed, and second of all, that that I was walking through that front door. So much information, just biologically, was being dropped down into me when I walked through that front door. It's quite the story. I write about it extensively and try to make sense of it in the book and in my songs.
Yeah, I was right there with you as you went through the orphanage there, and how you were describing the pictures of the nuns and the children. And I know that we have adoptees that are here with us this evening. As a matter of fact, we talked to several last evening that have gone back to, as well, to an orphanage or foster care to revisit, and what an emotional event that was for them. So from there on, let's fast forward a little bit to Mary and having to deal with all those feelings, and finally that trauma is you're starting to understand more and more about it. And you started to write The Foundling, but The Foundling came after the search, correct? And so this was all, you went on a search.
Well, it's been a wild journey. The way that I've made sense of the journey is by writing about it. Okay, so I got sober in 1990, and I've managed to stay sober since then. So I'm 31 years sober. After I got sober, not too long after I got sober, I started writing songs as a result of being brought to an open mic and watching one of my waitresses, I was in the restaurant business, play on a stage in Harvard Square, Cambridge, at Club Passim. And I watched her play, and a light bulb screwed in, and I just thought, oh my God, I want to do that. I want to get up there and do that. And so I always had a guitar, but I never wrote songs, and something told me to give it a go. And I started working on a song, eventually went to the open mic, and played terribly, horribly, really, really bad. Thank God there were no iPhones then. And I sucked. But something said, go back, do it again. It can't possibly be worse than that. And so I got into the habit of playing and performing at open mics, which is a place where you go and pay $5 or so, and you get a number and you wait your turn, and it's all other entry-level people who are learning the early, the beginning of being a performer, the early days. So it's all people who are not professional yet, some who want to be, some are just having fun and doing it as a hobby. And I've just spoken so long, I forgot your question. What was the question?
Well, I was trying to think of how the events unfolded from, okay, you went back to the orphanage, but when you began your search for your birth mother.
Okay, let me fast forward through that. I started writing songs and playing them. I fell in love with it. I went to open mics every night of the week. I made a record, which was basically a demo of what I was writing. And then I made another record, which was more of a real record. And it got me nominated for an award in Boston, Best New Folk Singer or something like that. I didn't win, but the nomination was really validating. Then I made another record, and that third record was the #1 independent release of the year in the New York Times. That's told me, get out of the restaurant business, get to Nashville and start taking this really seriously, because that is unheard of. To be #1 in the New York Times is ridiculous. And it told me that what I was chasing was possible. So I got to Nashville, I got a booking agent, I started traveling. And what happened was I played a show in New Orleans. And the promoter, from the stage, I said, I was born in New Orleans at St. Vincent's. And two things happened that night. One was after the show, a woman came up to me and said, my mom used to volunteer at St. Vincent's. And I'm like, yeah. She said, she used to hold the babies. Members of the churches, the Catholic churches in New Orleans would go to St. Vincent's and hold and rock the babies because there were way more babies than nuns, which freaked me out. I had never heard of such a thing. It did not land. I tried to hide my shock. All I said to her was, I want you to thank your beautiful mother. What year was that? And she said it was 63. I could have very well have been an infant that her mother rocked and held. Wow. So I just, please thank your mom for doing that work. What a beautiful thing. And it was like, oh, shoot, I wasn't being held. So that was the beginning of starting to understand some of the trauma that I carried. But the next day, the promoter said, hey, let's go get Oyster Po' Boys at Casamato's, which is on Magazine Street. Well, St. Vincent's is on Magazine Street. And as we're driving past it, she goes, hey, St. Vincent's is right there. You want to see it? And she pulled up in front of it and hit the brakes. And I had no planning. To me, St. Vincent's was like, I don't know, Pinocchio or freaking, I don't know, Mickey Mouse. I had a Disney understanding, a childhood understanding, very childlike understanding of this place. It never occurred to me to think about it as an adult. It just didn't. I didn't think about it. Why would I? I didn't know to think about it. And so I said, well, okay. And as we walked up the stairs, I saw in marble a stone on the front of the building. It said St. Vincent's Women and Infants Asylum. And that flipped me out. Like, asylum? You could tell it was a mighty, mighty Catholic institution at one point. It was dilapidated and run down at this point. It was a brothel, a boarding house. It was really quite, you wouldn't want to stay there overnight kind of place, but people, of course, did. And we walked in and there was a picture on the wall still of nuns and children. And it was a black and white. And the nuns had giant headpieces, like tablecloth size headpieces. And the babies all had prisoner of war look in their eyes. All of the children had deeply, deeply traumatized eyes. And I scanned the photo and looked for myself, and I didn't see myself there. But it was spooky and it was haunting. And I realized, oh my God, I'm leaning against the staircase where the picture was taken, probably 48 years prior. And so that began the journey for me of really starting to take this notion of the primal wound seriously. I found Nancy Verrier's seminal book really quickly after that. I started reading B.J. Lifton, really quickly after that, I got to meet Betty Jean. Not too long after that, she came to a show in New York where I played, and oh, she was wonderful. And I did a lot of research. I read more than 50 books around adoption trauma, and I wrote a record called The Foundling. And I put it out, and then that's when I met you, Marcy, because I got to give a keynote at the Orlando conference around The Foundling, and Nancy Verrier was there, and I got to meet her. It was an honor and a pleasure. And so I worked through a lot of my pain and troubles and trauma that I had no words for, using music and song as a vehicle to help articulate what is a nonverbal, pre-verbal experience. This all happened to me before I had words. And it helped me a lot. You know, a couple of years after that, I was invited to work with veterans and people who have served in the military who are dealing with PTSD and moral injury, all of the wounds of war. And having worked through so much of my own stuff using music and song, I was able to see how music and song could help them. But the years of traveling with the Foundling record connected me with so many adoptees and first mothers and adoptive parents who told me that the music that I was singing really spoke to their experience. And so I received a lot of validation and, importantly, empathy. And I think that's the big deal, is that we need to know we're not alone. I'm so happy to see everyone here today. We need to know our experience is not unique, that we're part of something that happened culturally, that it's not an angry God who singled me out. It was what happened because of the time that I was born in many, many ways. So I am going on and on and on, and I hope I'm not speaking too much. Give me another question.
Not at all. You know, you say your job is to convey human experience in a way that people connect to stories. And we know through storytelling that we can find our way through our own experience. We connect to others. We can almost virtually heal ourselves. But you said something in one of the TED Talks about sometimes, you know, we are not the story. We are not just the story. That's
right.
We become the storyteller.
That's right.
Share that with.
Yeah, that is a very, very important and powerful realization, that you don't have to be a songwriter to write your story. And when you start to write your story, you move from being the story to becoming the storyteller. And the storyteller has agency and authority and power, because we can tell our story through our reality instead of having other people's reality imposed on us. And when I work with writers and songwriters, when I work with members of the military who've been traumatized, I've also worked with doctors and nurses who've been on the front lines in COVID ICUs during this pandemic. What I always tell them is, in order to write a good song, you're going to have to break some rules. You're going to have to say some things that make you feel vulnerable and go against some rules that tell you to be silent. You know, certainly with veterans, what they're told is you're not allowed to feel. That you can't be in your feelings and be a good soldier. You got to put your feelings to the side and perform the way we trained you, which is well and good during war. But when you come home, if you can't stop doing that, you're gonna fail as a husband or a wife, and also be very, very troubled in your relationships, because emotion is part of how we relate to each other as human beings. You've got to feel. And so I work through that with them by using music and song to help them express how they feel. And that is a really important thing that I think that I was able to do as an adoptee, is break some rules. Because number one rule in my experience, given my generation, I'm 59, the number one rule was gratitude. I should be grateful. I should be grateful because I was adopted. And to not constantly express gratitude was to be ungrateful. So I had to break that down. And my adopted brother was not real happy about that when the record came out. He worried that it would disturb my adoptive mother. And so be it. Flipping tables is something we have to do sometimes to save ourselves. He's come around, but it was hard for him. He wasn't ready to hear that. So I think we either break the rules or the rules break us. So we tell our story as honestly and openly as we can, as a Hail Mary to save ourselves, no matter what perspective we're coming from in the constellation, you call it. You used to call it the triad. Telling our story is how we understand our story, I think. The great Southern writer Flannery O'Connor said, I write so I can read it, so I can make sense of what I think. That's also been my experience as both an author and a songwriter.
And, thinking back to when you were 12 years old, did you ever imagine that that guitar that Aunt Jenny gave you at 12 years old, you'd be sitting here tonight and you would have all these albums and doing all these writers' retreats and workshops?
No, this is all beyond my my wildest dreams. I got sober in 1990, and that's when I hopped on the magic carpet. And I've been writing ever since. There's just this mystery that sends me where I need to be, and I'm able to appreciate that. It's not necessarily me. There's deep purpose connected to what I do, and it brings me to where I can be most useful, and that makes me have even more deep purpose, which then brings me to the next place where I can be useful, and it results in a really good life,
Yeah, I was thinking about, let's talk about the Grand Ole Opry. You played at the Grand Ole Opry on their 90th celebration. Was their 90th year celebration, correct?
That's right. I performed at the Grand Ole Opry for their 90th anniversary with a veteran that I had written a song with. His name is Joshua Gertz. And we played that song, and he received a massive standing ovation. And for him, it was that moment where he realized deeply that telling his story was helping other people. And I think that's one of the compelling reasons to write, is to tell our story in order to help other people. People resonated. There were guys in the front row, I could tell they were Vietnam vets, gray-haired guys who just stuffed it all down and tried hard to not feel it. And we sang Josh's song, and it just broke them open. I could see them fighting the tears, and then the tears came. I could see their wives grabbing their hands and holding it. And I felt the magic of empathy. What happens with a successful song is empathy. We become one for that 4 minutes. And it's really beautiful. And Josh got to experience that. And it gave him a lot of hope. He came to me after having been in an explosion. His Humvee rolled over an improvised explosive device in Iraq, and he suffered spinal injury. But he's walking now. What happened was hope, and he started working hard to get out of that chair because his kids were young, and he wanted to be available to them in a way that the wheelchair was limiting. And he was able to get on a walker, then get on a cane, and then walk on his own accord, and he's walking now. It was a lot of work, and it began with hope. Everything begins with hope.
And Mary, when you did those writers' workshops with those veterans and you made those connections, you not only connected with them, as you said, their wives were crying as well.
Oh, yeah.
And you wrote a song, with the families, just for them.
Oh, yeah.
War. I mean, that one is so powerful. There's like
Yeah.
35 songs on the album.
I'm
Right?
sorry.
There are
Yeah,
35
there's
songs.
no. There's I think 11 songs that I've written 50 or 60 songs now with veterans and their families. The Rifles and Rosary Beads record that got nominated for the Grammy was 11 songs that I chose because it told the story from a bunch of different perspectives. And that story is the story of the women and men who've served in the Middle East during this long period of war. And the kids. You know, I learned really quickly that when one member of a family serves, the whole family serves. And so trying to get each perspective and female soldiers and female sailors and female fighter pilots. I have a female fighter pilot I wrote with who was a flight instructor. That song made the record. So I'm trying to get it from a lot of people's viewpoint.
Well, I think what I'd like to do at this time is we have so many with us this evening. And I know they're dying to start asking their own questions as well. So if you would like to ask Mary a question, if you could go ahead and raise your virtual hand and let's get going here. Who would like to start off? Excuse my dog here. And I'm reading through the comments here. Nobody want to take their hand off mute? Or
Laureen.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, you're still muted, Laureen.
Got it.
There you go.
It's really good to meet you. And I was wondering, in your work, writing the music and helping veterans, did you meet any veterans that happen to be adoptees? Did you ever have any aha moments with adoption while you were working with the veterans?
What a great question. I was asked to write with a psychiatrist who works at the VA in South Mississippi, who was an adoptee. And it was one of the hardest songs in the 7 years I've been working as a co-writer. He was also a veteran. And he was training to is now a facilitator for songwriting with soldiers. He was training to do that. It was one of the hardest songs that I wrote. And I don't know why, but Kevin and I spent a lot of time trying to get to, it's just so hard as an adoptee because what happened is almost always pre-verbal. And we need words. And so the words become, I don't know. It's really quite hard to articulate. You know, for me working through my own stuff, I use story, but it's not autobiography. I just use story as a narrative, and it's fictional, but it's true. And I used a lot of the readings that I took in to move the story along. But writing with Kevin was hard. It's so interesting that it's easier to write about war trauma than adoption trauma. It's so interesting. It's hard to write about. It's hard to articulate.
We have a few writers in this group that's here tonight, and I belong to a couple of different writers groups, adoptee writers. And when you were talking about helping the veterans write, or when you were talking about your story and you were talking about songwriting and how that helps to get it out there and help share and bring other people into your own experience. I mean, I could really relate to that as a writer, and I've written a memoir, and several other people here in this group I know have as well. And
great.
I loved it. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, it's great. You know, I think it's incumbent on us to tell our truth so that we can move this story forward. We're stuck in a real misunderstanding of our stories. And the only way we're going to make a progress, I think, in understanding what all this entails is if we tell our stories bravely. And there's going to be pushback. To tell the story honestly means we have to break rules and offend some people. And that's hard. You're vulnerable.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Believe me, I know.
Well, thank you. That's what I
Thank
wanted to hear. That's exactly right.
Thank you. Congrats on your memoir. It's awesome.
Thanks.
Now we'll have to get Mary out here for a writer's retreat. I think that would be awesome.
Yes, definitely.
We'll have to talk about that, Mary, and see how we can get you out. Because that's in person, correct? You do all those in person.
Yeah. I work with songwriters. I've not worked with authors yet, although I guess that's probably next. But I do teach
That would be
songwriting.
helpful.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't really teach it. All I do is encourage courage. And
Well, that's how I feel too. That's how I feel too. It's like I'm, you know, I feel like I'm not an expert, but I told my story and I want to help other adoptees get their stories out, you know, through memoir, or, you know, it's such a pleasure to hear you're getting it out through songwriting and helping others with their trauma. It's perfect. So appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, it's through stories that we understand each other. And more importantly, it's how we understand ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Okay, some more questions for Mary?
Sarah.
Hi, Mary, another writer here.
Yay for the writers.
Hey, I know there's a lot of us here. It's so fun.
Great.
And Jennifer is here as well. And we were just, we run an adoptee, I'm sorry for the background noise. We run a group called Adoptee Voices. Tina has participated, and several others here. And we're starting a group, a newish way to go about it, where we're really focusing on tapping into the kind of inner child inside to help writers with kind of getting that critic off the shoulder, and accessing the unconscious. I'm just wondering, I would love to hear if you have any tips that you give in your writing workshops for just getting to the play and letting go and just having fun.
Yeah, you know, I do. I work with songwriters on this a lot. And one of the things that I talk about when I'm working with the songwriter on this is that the critic will not be silenced by shouting at that voice. You can't outshout the critic. It just gets louder. So what are we left with? Well, I think of the critic as a part of my brain that's trying to help me. And yet it's hyperactive. And so often if the critic is jumping in before I've even written anything, what I have to do is actually talk to it and say, hey, I know you're trying to help me here, but I need to send you to the corner and I need you to have a timeout. And you wait over there and I'm going to have you back over here when we have something to edit. Because if you don't let me write anything, you don't get to play. There's nothing to edit. The critic is trying to protect us from rejection. We don't want to be outcast. We don't want to look stupid. We don't want to be offensive. We want to stay in connection with other people, and we don't want our writing to get us banished or canceled. And so the critics, you know, hyper vigilantly trying to protect us, and I think can very much get in the way of writing. And so I think editing is a very different process than writing. And I think the editor really likes having a lot to work with. And so if I can just appease that critic / editor by saying, I'll give you a lot if you just go in the corner and wait a while and let me play here. We're just coming up with some ideas right now. This isn't going out in the world yet. I know you're going to try to help me when it's ready to go out in the world. So we're going to invite you back in before we do that. But for now, get to the corner and shut up, or I'm never going to write. The critic is a voice that is always going to be there, and so I've learned to have a conversation with it, and I've tried to shout it down before, or somehow tame it. And the best thing to do is to tell it you'll be invited back when the time is right.
I love that. Thank you. You're
You're
playing with
welcome.
it, playing with the critic. I love it.
The critic really wants to help us. But it doesn't quite know the timing of how that works. And no matter how many times you teach it, it forgets. So it's like a kid. It really needs to be reminded every time I sit down and write. It's going to suck for a while, okay? I understand that this is not the final draft, but you got to let me, the Anne Lamott thing, you got to let me have my shitty first draft. Because if you don't, you'll have nothing to edit. So give me a little time here. Yeah. Hmm.
Let's see. Diana asked, how old were you when your adopted parents told you about your adoption?
I've always been told I was adopted. But I was in my 40s when I walked into St. Vincent's. And that is really, really profound. It became extremely real that this mythical creature, first mother in the ethos, was an actual human being. She came out of dream state into reality when I walked through those doors. And I had to contend with the reality as an adult. It all came crashing down, the Disneyfication of my story, that my childlike mind was, still there. And I hadn't updated my understanding as an adult. I don't think I would have if I hadn't walked in there, because I didn't know I needed to.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mary, what was your takeaway from the primal wound? You said you read that. So obviously there was a lot going on there.
Yeah, my takeaway from the primal wound was that I had childhood trauma and that it wasn't going to go away by wishing it away, that I had work to do. And the trauma was deep, and it made decisions for me. And it led me to a place of addiction and dysfunction. And I had a lot of work to do because it was not going to go away easy, and it doesn't go away all the way. I still carry it, but it's not what it was. One of the things that I internalized, and I didn't even know this until much, 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 much later, is the belief that I was unlovable. And my God, that screwed my life up. I had to rewrite that belief. And this is why I called the book Saved by a Song, because I think music and song helped me to rewrite that lie into a truth, which is very, very hard to do, to rewrite that deep-seated belief that I was given away because I'm unlovable. It's the only sense I could make out of it. And I didn't even do it consciously. It wasn't conscious, it was subconscious. And adoptees are nodding, they understand. Yes, it makes no sense to be told your first mother gave you away because she loved you so much. Even a kid's like, what? Wait a minute. Hang on. Can't be it. It must be because I'm unlovable. And oh man, that's a heavy burden. To believe that is to make decision after decision after decision that's self-destructive. I had to rewrite that. I had to work through that. And primal wound was the beginning for me of understanding that I had trauma. And I didn't know I had trauma. I just thought I was messed up. Nobody called it trauma. Nobody had a language for what happened to me. Oprah has this book out now. It's not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. And that is a better way of framing it. It takes some of the shame out, and it invites us to tell our story. That invitation to tell our story is a big deal. It's a big, big deal.
And let's see, Joni says, was a part of that the writing Worthy? So that's a beautiful song that you wrote. That
Absolutely.
America's Got Talent, Sarah Potenza sang that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what moment? How did all that go about?
Yeah, absolutely. The song Worthy is me expressing the hope that I'm worthy. Worthy of what? Love, of course, love. That came after almost 5 years of recovery in Al-Anon. I got into AA, into 12-step programs to work with my addiction. And then I had to deal with my addiction to addicts, which led me to Al-Anon. So I got all the isms. You name it, I got it. The only thing I haven't done compulsively is gamble, because I work too hard for my money. So I am not a compulsive gambler. I'm a compulsive everything else. So I got into Al-Anon and started doing the work around codependency and dependency. And it led me to the song Worthy. Betty LaVette, the great R&B singer, soul singer, put that song out as well. And she named the record Worthy. And Sarah, I sent it to Sarah because I love her voice. She's an East Nashville friend. And she started singing it and got into American's Got Talent and sang it on the show. And the judges really reacted to it. But honestly, the important thing for me is articulating the sense that maybe I'm worthy. And the rest is all just icing on the cake. And the song helped me to say it in a way that I was witnessed. It's hard to say that and be witnessed if you don't fully believe it. And it helped me to internalize and start to believe that I'm worthy. It's a long road. What a long road.
Could you, Mary, could we ask you to play a couple of lines of Worthy?
You know, I don't perform it anymore. I don't even know how to play it. I've let it go to the big singers, the gospel voices, the big singers.
Okay.
Yeah, I've moved on. I don't even know the chords to it anymore. I don't play any of the songs from the Foundling anymore either.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, you know why? It's painful, and I don't want to re-traumatize myself. I worked through it. I don't want to go back in there and do that to listeners or to myself. I let it go and it set it free in a way. And I've moved into other realms, and I'm happy to have written it, and I'm happy to have moved on.
Great. How about, well, let's go back to the veterans then for a few minutes. What about, could you play a little bit?
Yeah, how about from the perspective of the wives?
Yes, I love that song.
You mentioned the war after the war, and this is written with military spouses who thought that their husbands, if they got their husbands home alive in one piece, that they could get on with their life and their marriage. That the hope and the goal was to get their sweethearts home safe. And then when they got home, they weren't all the way home, and they didn't even have a clue what was going on. And so what they said to me is, it's like there's a war after the war, and nobody told us about that. And that was a title if I ever heard one. So the song became The War After the War, and it talks about military spouses feeling invisible and not quite knowing what to do, and who's going to take care of us. And the song starts with, who's going to care for the ones who care for the ones who went to war. And that's really relevant. I think that it could be even looked at through the lens right now of who's going to care for the frontline caregivers, because they're tired. They're real tired. And this surge is just depleting them of what energy they have left during this pandemic. They're really worn out. Who's going to care for them? And that's, I would have never known that this song would go on to mean that when I wrote it, but that's how good songs stay alive. They reinvent themselves as life moves on and take on new meanings. So anyway, I'll play it for you. Who's gonna care for the ones who care for the ones who went to war? There's landmines in the living room, eggshells on the floor. I lost myself in the shadow of your honor and your pain. You stare out of the window as I Dreams go down the drain, invisible. The war after the war. I get no basic training, I get no Purple Heart. I am supposed to carry on, I can't fall apart. People look at you and thank you for the sacrifice you made. They look at me and smile, say I'm lucky, you're okay. Invisible. The war after the war. But I'm a soldier too, just like you, serving something bigger than myself. I serve unseen, caught in between my pain and the pain of someone else. But I'm stronger than you think I am. I'm right here by your side. I am not your enemy. I don't want to fight. There's no going back in time. I know you're not the same, but you are not the only one for whom the world has changed. Invisible. The war after the war. Invisible. The war after the war. You know, as I play that, and I think of singing this for adoptees and people in the adoption constellation, it occurs to me that that's what we're dealing with, is in many ways the war after the war. That there's this long-term experience that we aren't prepared for and no one told us about. At least no one told me. And much like the military spouses, it's surprising and somewhat shocking that this goes on and on and on. That I still wake up sometimes falling through space, feeling as though I'm untethered. And I know that's from living in an orphanage my first year of life. That experience is definitely still in my brain. And sometimes it scares the hell out of me. When I wake up, I'm traumatized. And yet I have done so much work that I am really not making decisions from that traumatic place anymore. I can watch it, but it doesn't own me, if you know what I mean. I do have some agency now, and that is a big deal. Can I read a little snippet?
Oh, we would love for you to read us a snippet.
That'd be great. Let me see if I can find that piece. Yeah, people ask me if I believe songs can change the world. And my answer is yes, absolutely. Of course they can. And here's how. A song can change a heart by creating empathy. A changed heart has the power to change a mind. And when a mind changes, a person changes. When people change, the world changes. One heart, one song, one mind, one person at a time. Songs can bring us a deeper understanding of each other and of ourselves. They can open our hearts to love. I believe songs that heal come from a higher place. They help us with the struggle of being human by letting us know we are not alone. This is the greatest gift a song can give a songwriter, and a songwriter can give the world. Bruce Springsteen said, music is a repair shop. Basically, I'm a repairman. I love that. Songs have the power to repair hearts and heal souls, saved by a song.
That's great.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Mary, there's also something as we are starting to wind down to close that in accessing the universal that I wanted to read to you that I highlighted that I wanted
Thank
to
you.
share. The deeply personal is what connects each of us to the universal. The severing of that connection through trauma, addiction, etc., is life-threatening. The rejoining, a fundamental component of survival. Mercy Now, which we all heard at the opening, which is one of my favorite songs, came to me as a prayer in a time when loved ones in the world around me were sinking into darkness. The desperation I'd felt, laced with anger and fear, began to give way to a new calm. I began to feel connected. I think that's so powerful. That passage is so powerful because that's one of the reasons why we're all here tonight and why NAAP, this organization, is here for the Adoption Constellation, to share those stories, make those deep connections, and acceptance and learn, go to a place of peace and acceptance. I just thought that was powerful. And Mercy Now, of course, we know that Mercy Now, Rolling Stones rated that one of the top 20 saddest song that's ever been played. But you have a different spin on that. And I love that, what you said about sadness and reality, Mary, about Mercy Now.
Yeah, I mean, you want to be in the top 10 on Rolling Stone, anything, right? But they got it wrong. It's not a sad song. It's a real song. I think music has gone so far away from being grounded in what's real and just jumped off the high dive into escapism. And so if a song is real, we call it sad. The Disneyfication of music has been tragic, I think. We can sing what's real and experience both sadness and happiness because it connects us to each other. That's the complexity of music. It allows us to be both happy and sad at the same time, which doesn't equal sad. It equals human. So the complexity of it is getting lost in these reality sing-a-thons and the commercial music business run by multinational corporations. I think music and song at a ground level is transformative when we write and sing with each other. Music business be damned. I'd love to read one more passage if you'd allow me.
Absolutely.
Several years ago, an elderly gentleman stood waiting at the end of the autograph line after I played a show in London. Bent forward from time and struggle, he walked with the aid of a silver-handled walking stick. With a long white beard trimmed to a point just above his chest, black-framed trapezoid eyeglasses, a gray gangster-style fedora, a white gauze summer shirt without a collar, and a buttoned-up vest with a pocket watch chain, he looked like Sigmund Freud to me. I met the intensity of his eyes and waited for him to speak. He stood for a long moment, looking at me, tears glistening. Then he softly said, "I'm here to thank you, Mary. I live in Switzerland. Today, I came back to London for the first time in 70 years. Today, I went to the place where I was sexually abused when I was 4. You have no idea the impact of your music, the courage it gives people. I want to thank you and express my gratitude to you in person." Can you love someone in an instant? Of course you can. My heart swung open as I took in the beauty of this brave man standing in front of me. I loved him. I reached for his hand and I held it. I told him I hoped he could find peace from his childhood abuse. He nodded yes, he thinks he can now. He leaned across the table and he kissed my cheeks, one and then the other. He smiled a half smile and then he slowly walked away.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Mary. We've really enjoyed having you this evening, and we have 2 things that we'd like to close with. First, I'd like to share with you, Mary, that we do have our organization. We do hold support groups twice a month, And David Bowl, if you could take yourself off of mute. David is one of our board of directors, and he hosts a addiction and recovery twice a month. David? You off mute, David? Well, where did he go? Okay, well, he was there just a minute ago. But we did want to mention that to you, Mary, that we do that twice a month, and it's Pathways to Recovery for adoptees, addiction and recovery. And then we also have a support group for putting yourself back together after reunion. So again, David is one of our, I think he's gone ahead and posted it, yeah, in the chat room. So you'll be able to see that, but we wanted to share that with you. And then I think you have a giveaway, don't you?
Yeah. How did you want to do that?
Actually, we've already gone ahead and pulled somebody out.
Okay.
Amy Beeman, if you would take yourself off of mute, you've been drawn, chosen to win an autographed copy of Saved by a Song.
Oh my gosh. Yay. Thank you.
Yes.
So
So
I'm going to make it.
Yeah, so just send Marcy your address, and Marcy will send it to me via email, and I will put it in the mail tomorrow.
Oh, thank you so much, Mary. I appreciate it. It means so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. You're so welcome.
okay, did anybody have any closing comments for the evening? Mary, we've just loved having you on tonight. Thank you so much for carving out some time for us. We appreciate you, and we're out there watching everything that you do, cheering you on. And
Oh,
hope
thank
we
you.
get you back here for a workshop. We'll have to follow up on that. A writer's workshop
Yeah,
for
thank you.
adoptees.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love this community very much. I'm very much a member of the community. And I made a very good friend about 20 years ago in Nashville who was a first mother. And we hiked the park outside of Nashville, Warner Park, for years, a 5-mile trail. And she died this year unexpectedly. And it was such a close relationship, me being an adoptee, her being a first mother. We were very, very close. And then there was Lynn Franklin, another first mother that I got very close to, who just died 2 weeks ago, who was a member of this community. As some of you knew her, she was a book agent. She was the agent for Deepak Chopra and Desmond Tutu. She was a first mother as well. I've lost 2 really close and important people. There's something special in a relationship between adoptee and first mother. I never reunited with mine, but those women in many ways took the place of that. And I'm grieving. I miss them. And so being invited back into this community right now means a lot to me. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mary.
Mm.
Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Everybody have a great evening, and we'll see you Friday night.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Mary, hang on 1 second for me.
Thank y'all.
Play.